Chapter 21 of Sisters. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Lucy Burgoyne. Sisters by Ada Cambridge. Chapter 21. Deb yearned to have her Australian sisters. Frances was European, with her at Redford, as in the old days. She hated to be luxuriating there without them. But for a time the husband stood in the way. She could not bring herself to ask them too. The draper she hardly knew at all. In her correspondence with Rose his name was rarely mentioned by either, except in comprehensive messages at the end of letters, and Bennet Goldsworthy's company, Deb said, simply made her ill. It had made her ill since, after her father's death, the clergyman had permitted himself, in her hearing, to vent his personal disappointment at the unexpected smallness of his wife's inheritance. The man had presumed to take the air of one reasonably aggrieved. He had even dropped angry words about deception in the first heat of his chagrin, as if, said haughty Deb, it was not enough for him to have married one of us, when he was understood to say that he had arranged his life in accordance with the expectations he had been given the right to entertain. Deb's withering comment was, as if his life matters. But she was intolerant in her dislikes. Poor Mr Goldsworthy, incurable cadger that he was bound to feel the family reverses acutely. When he had married Miss Pennycuick for her good, in that risky manner, he had naturally expected to be rewarded for the deed. If ever it be safe to trust to appearances, it had seemed safe then, so far as the solidity of the Pennycuicks' position was concerned. They had imposed upon him with their careless splendour. They had misled him by their condonation of the marriage, which restored Mary to her privileges as a daughter of the house. Most thoroughly had they taken him in by that voluntary wedding gift of £500, with this habit, which he took to be the general habit, of getting all he could and giving nothing that he was not obliged to give. He could not understand the airy flinging away of all that money, and there was no call for it, only as a proof that Miss Pennycuick had more than he needed for all the legitimate claims on him. And the old man had said again and again that his daughters would share and share alike in whatever he had to leave. When Mr Bentley, the new parson, came, young, sincere, self-sacrificing, devoted, a poor preacher and a hard worker, who refused to batten on Redford bounty, all the old furniture of the parsonage was made over to him on time payment, and the Goldsworthys began life in Melbourne on the basis of a rich wife. It was surprising how the legend grew amongst his set that Mr Goldsworthy had a rich wife, that she might dress the part on all occasions, so that there would be no mistake about it. The family, provided trousseau was added to. It was also subtracted from, for the simplicity that was her taste and distinction was hateful in his sight. When she looked common in a cotton gown, she lowered his dignity in the world and amongst his professional fellows, supposed to be so envious of it, in spite of her red face. Deb had had to suffer the shock of seeing her sister in silk of a morning more than once, and it had been reported to her, though she did not believe it, that Mary wore a jewelled necklace to church on Sundays. Deb did not go to Bennet's church, which was, fortunately, a long way from her suburban villa home, and she had been to his Melbourne house but twice. On her first visit she had penetrated to Mary's room, and been horrified to find the husband's clothes hung up in it from her door pegs. and his razors and brushes mixed up with her own things on her dressing table. The arrangement in the country parsonage was to be accounted for. To find it here, made deliberately and of malice prepense, was to see what gulfs now yawned between Mary's old life and the new one. Deb reached forth for a comb, and drew back her hand as if she had inadvertently touched a snake. Mary's red face went purple as she explained that there was not space in that house for a dressing room. There was space enough going to waste in the drawing room, where Deb had her feelings hurt on her second visit. It was a very large room, sharing the front of the house with a large study, and behind them all the other rooms huddled as of no account, none of them bigger than Keziah's Redford storeroom. The study was sacred to the master of the house, the drawing room to company. One look showed Deb that Mary never sat there, and that it was not she who had chosen and arranged the furniture. The foundation of the scheme was a costly suite, upholstered in polished silk brocade, the separate pieces standing at fixed intervals apart on a gorgeous Axminster carpet. When Deb entered the room, Mr Goldsworthy was bending over the central sofa, excited and talking loudly. Miss Goldsworthy and Mary stood by, mute and drooping. Ruby looked on irresponsibly, with joy in her eye. "What's the matter?" inquired Deb, advancing. As she was not a great lady then, but quite the contrary, Mr Goldsworthy explained what was the matter, with scarcely any modification of his minatory air. A caller had called yesterday, bringing with her a little boy. Mary had thoughtlessly fed the little boy with soft cake, and the little boy had first made his hands sticky with it, and then pawed the sofa, which had cost him, B.G., nearly £20, part of Mary's £500. Greasy marks had been left on that lovely brocade, for which he, not she, had given 35 shillings a yard, and which he had forbidden children to be allowed to sit on. As if that were not bad enough, they, for example, those two poor women, had, without telling him, tried to take the marks out with some wretched chemist's stuff, which had not taken them out, but only spread them more. Now the sofa was completely spoiled, and what to do he did not know, unless he could match the brocade, which was scarcely likely. And ill could he afford to be buying brocade, and so on. Finally he went out to consult with a furniture repairer of his acquaintance, banging doors behind him. Deb cast a scornful glance upon the smudged brocade. What a fuss about nothing! She brushed the subject by. "My brother is very particular about this room," Miss Goldsworthy apologised for him. "So I see. And he is very fond of this brocade, which he chose himself. It certainly is pretty, don't you think so? But too delicate to wear well. I am always frightened to see children go near it, or even grown up people when it has been raining, or if they have been gathering dust. It does show every spot so. And it was the mother's fault. I sighed to Mary to give him a biscuit, but his mother picked out that cake, which had jam in it. It is very unfortunate. I don't wonder at his being vexed." "Why don't you have chintz covers, Moll?" "Oh, he wouldn't like it to be covered up," Miss Goldsworthy struck in, and seemed shocked herself at the suggested waste. Mary lifted dull eyes to her sister's face. "Come and have some tea," she said. "Come, auntie, it is no use your worrying yourself." And they went into the poky living room, which smelt of meals, and had tea, and the sort of barren talk that presence of the third person necessitated. Mary seemed purposely to avoid a tete-a-tete. When Miss Goldsworthy went to